Production, Freedom Committee of Orange County, a 501c3 nonprofit public benefit corporation, passing the torch of liberty on to future generations through the personal military history stories from the veterans who contributed to our country's history. Our theme for today is veterans and veterans families. Thank you for your service and welcome home. And this is a wreath on the front door emphasizing welcome home. This is, if you have not been to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, it's right at Freedom Park, they call it. So today's the 29th of March, National Vietnam War Veterans Day. This is, you see on the left is the big stage, and then the eternal flame is in the urn. Today's speaker is Major Hammond Salley, United States Army. One more. Yes. One moment. Okay, so Major Hammond Salley served 21 years in the regular Army with assignments throughout the United States, 2 Cold War tours in Germany and 2 tours in Vietnam. Major Salley has served in armored, airborne, and mechanized infantry divisions, as well as special operations units. He is airborne, ranger, special forces, and psychological operations qualified. Major Salley was in Saigon during the 1968 Tet Offensive as a member of the top secret unit known as MAG-V SOG. He was then sent forward to Operations Base 3 at the Khe Sanh Combat Base near the DMZ and Laotian border. Forward Operations Base 3 was co-located with the then surrounded 26th Marine Regiment during the siege of Khe Sanh, the most famous battle of the Vietnam War. Major, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Can everybody hear me without using the microphone? Okay, great. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As I look around, it's gratifying to see the people that took off on a Monday to come for this presentation and this ceremony. And thank you for coming to the Freedom Committee's first ever National Vietnam War Veterans Day observance, and apparently the only one that's being held that we know of in the state of California. Everyone saw the picture earlier of the Vietnamese and the 2 soldier statues at the Vietnam War Memorial in Westminster. An American soldier and a Vietnamese soldier. It's a beautiful statue, and if you haven't seen it, I hope you get the opportunity to go visit it in Westminster. It's very worthwhile of a trip. But it's 2 soldier-to-soldier statues representing comrades in arms during that conflict. At least all you Vietnam veterans will have to agree that the memorial is certainly a very poignant reminder of our personal experiences in Vietnam when you see it. As you are aware, we're gathered here this morning to celebrate and honor all Vietnam veterans who served during those tumultuous years of conflict. Vietnam veterans represent all ranks, all services, and military services comprising differing tours and duties in Vietnam. I believe that, like me, most of you that were in Vietnam or any conflict consider their wartime experiences as defining moments in their life. My remarks will be short, and I will begin with the little remembered origins of the National Vietnam War Veterans Day. On March 29, 1974, President Nixon declared March 29th as Vietnam Veterans Day to mark the one-year anniversary of the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from Vietnam when the Military Assistance Command for Vietnam was disbanded and the latest U.S. combat troops departed. And the last combat troops departed. In President Obama's March 29, 2012 proclamation highlighting the then ongoing 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War events, he likewise declared March 29, 2012 as Vietnam Veterans Day. His proclamation called upon all Americans to observe this day with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities that commemorate the 50-year anniversary of the Vietnam War. Subsequently, in 2017, President Trump signed into law the Vietnam War, add the word war, Veterans Recognition Act, which designated March 29th of each year, not just the 1 year of the previous president, but each year as National Vietnam Veterans Day. Accordingly, the National Vietnam Veterans Day commemorates the sacrifices of Vietnam veterans and their families, and is part of the national effort to recognize the men and women who were denied a proper welcome upon returning home more than 48 years ago. I'm sure many of you can recall some of the bystander abuse we experienced in the San Francisco airport when returning. I sure do. This day also recognizes the same month and year the last of the POWs returned to American soil. Although this day is intended to recognize and thank American Vietnam War veterans, I'd like to note that warriors from a number of other countries are also veterans of that conflict, especially our South Vietnamese comrades in arms, as represented by the statue you saw earlier in the pictures behind me on the screen. Likewise, and although very few Americans realize it, 5 other countries provided troops in support of the Republic of Vietnam. In fact, most veterans don't realize it. They were Australia, Thailand, South Korea, New Zealand, and the Philippines. On occasion, I have been asked is how do we, as a country, become so involved in Vietnam? The answer is complex, but my simple reply is that started in 1954 with the defeat of the British at Dien Bien Phu, of the French at Dien Bien Phu by the Communist Viet Minh forces under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh. As a result, Vietnam was subsequently divided in North and South Vietnam. Then America became even more concerned about the domino theory of communist aggression. In 1954, to help stem the communist tide, America and 7 other countries signed the Manila Pact, which formed the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, and which was better known as CEDAW. CEDAW was basically a collective defense primarily created to block further communist gains in Southeast Asia, thus forming the framework for our involvement in Vietnam. Now we'll touch on some of the statistics regarding American involvement and sacrifices in Vietnam. Although I haven't verified this data, I will say that it appears fairly consistent across the internet. Overall, 9,087,000 military personnel served on active duty during the official Vietnam War from February 1961 to May 1975. Of those, approximately 2,710,000, which was mentioned earlier, Americans served in uniform in Vietnam. Of those, 261 Americans have been awarded the Medal of Honor. Although perhaps more appropriate for Memorial Day, here are a few statistics regarding casualty deaths to emphasize American sacrifices in this conflict. There are 58,282 names on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. Of those, 50,381 were enlisted, and another 7,874 were officers and warrant officers. 8 women on the wall were nurses. West Virginia had the highest casualty rate per capita in the nation. There were 411 West Virginians on the wall. The next 2 items tie in closely with the famous Tet Offensive in 1968. The most casualty deaths for a single day was on January 31st, 1968, right at the start of the Tet Offensive, with approximately 245 deaths. The most casualty deaths for a single month was May 1968, with approximately 2,415 deaths. Of those returning as wounded veterans, 25,000 veterans were returned or disabled. 23,214 of those were 100% disabled. 5,283 of those lost limbs. And 1,081 of those sustained multiple amputations. I don't know who said this, but I feel it's very appropriate here. To those veterans who survived the war, and we obviously those here did, we did, and to the families those who did not, we see the faces and we feel the pain that these numbers created. We are, until we too pass away, haunted with these numbers because they are and were our friends, fathers, husbands, wives, sons, and daughters. Through the years, some common myths about our involvement in Vietnam have evolved. One common belief was that fighting in Vietnam was not as intense as in World War II. A fact. The average infantryman in the South Pacific during World War II saw about 40 days of combat in 4 years. However, the average infantryman in Vietnam saw about 240 days of combat in 1 year. Another common belief is that most Vietnam veterans were drafted. Actually, 2/3 of the men who served in Vietnam were volunteers. Maybe that's one way of avoiding the draft. However, 2/3 of the men who served in World War II were in fact drafted. A third common belief is the war was fought largely by the poor and uneducated. Fact, servicemen who went to Vietnam for well-to-do areas, more rich areas, had a slightly elevated risk of dying because they were more likely to be educated pilots or infantry officers. Overall, Vietnam veterans were well educated. 79% had a high school education or even better. Now, some sobering thoughts for us Vietnam veterans, and I think this was brought up a little earlier. Sadly, Vietnam veterans are dying at the rate of 390 each day. Of the approximately 2,710,000 Americans uniformed and served in Vietnam, less than 850,000 estimated to be alive today. That's only 31.4% of Vietnam veterans still living. The youngest American Vietnam veteran's age is approximately 61 years old. Finally, some overall returning Vietnam veteran success stories. Vietnam veterans represent 9.7% of their generation. They had a lower unemployment rate than the same non-vet age groups. Their personal income exceeded that of non-veteran age groups by more than 18%. There was no difference in drug usage between Vietnam vets and non-Vietnam veterans in the same age groups. They were less likely to be in prison. Only 0.5% of Vietnam veterans have been jailed for crimes. 85% of the veterans made successful transitions to civilian life. 97% of the veterans were honorably discharged. 91%, and I like the next statistics, 91% of the veterans say they were glad to have served. 74% of the veterans said they would serve again even knowing the outcome. I know I would. And finally, 87% of Americans now hold Vietnam veterans in high esteem. In summary, I will share a quote from President Obama regarding Vietnam veterans. You're often blamed for a war you didn't start when you should have been commended for serving your country with valor. You are sometimes blamed for misdeeds of a few when the honorable service of the many should have been praised. You came home and sometimes are denigrated when you should have been celebrated. Today, the Freedom Committee of Orange County celebrates and honors all Vietnam veterans, especially those in attendance. Welcome home and thank you for your service. Thank you.
Okay, do you have any questions? Yes, sir.
Yes. What time period did you serve in Vietnam?
67, 68, 71, 72.
You saw a lot of combat.
More in 67, 68 than I did in my second tour. I was in the Corps headquarters. Pardon?
240 days a year.
240 days. Yes, sir?
Have you been back, sir?
No, sir. But I know a lot of friends have, and I think I've talked to several people in the Freedom Committee that have also gone back, but I just never had the desire to go back. However, my wife likes to cruise, and I know there are a lot of cruises that go visit Hanoi and a lot of other places, you know. So we'll see. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Currently, the quote Democratic unquote Republic of Vietnam is freaked out about communist China. So they're reaching out for aid and help by the United States, and they report that they're going to dread the name Harvard giving up for American aircraft carriers and warships to dock there. How do you look at this?
Well, one time they were enemies, but I guess they got a lot of resorts now in Da Nang and a lot of other places that are trying to win favor. You know, it's like World War II. You know, after World War, my dad served 4 years in Europe in World War II. But I'm back in Germany, early 1963, and all my German neighbors talking to them. You know, so it's former enemies. The fact, communism is a different story. But people that you fought and you meet again, they were veterans. When I went back to Germany in the late 70s, I got invited to German World War II veterans groups, which I felt very good about. And we were all veterans. We weren't enemies or anything else. So, yes, sir.
You said you were in Saigon during the Tet Offensive.
Yes, sir.
Where were you located?
Where I was in a hotel, believe it or not, in downtown, right in the center of town when it started. My office was further out, and when all the shooting started, very foolishly, I got in the Jeep and went and grabbed a couple of weapons from our armory and came back to the hotel. The bullets were singing all around. The day before, everybody was getting ready for the Tet, and there's beautiful decorations all over the place, and firecrackers, strings of firecrackers, just hanging down 3 stories. They were ready to light the next day. And the presentations I give them here, I've shown pictures of the day before and the day after, and there's smoke in the background from the embassy area. And we went up on the roof of the hotel, and there were bullets singing overhead.
But what hotel? Remember?
It wasn't, well, one I frequency was the Rex on the corner, but I can't remember the name of the hotel I stayed there. But that didn't last very long.
I was in Saigon then.
Yeah, that's not what she took a picture of.
We know what, yeah. Lisa's pants.
All right? All right.